What up, ho biscuits? It's your girl Skitten, back at it again. Let's all just take a moment to woosah. Events of the past couple of weeks, I know, have a lot of y'all on edge, have a lot of y'all stressed out, and I would just like you guys to know that my channel is a place of not necessarily peace, because your girl gets pretty loud, but of love and understanding. You know, I do my best not to get super political on here because, you know, y'all don't come here for politics, y'all come here for a good time. But at the end of the day, I am still a black woman. My husband is still a black man. My mom and dad are black, like, you feel me? So black issues just hold a really big space in my heart. And like I said, I don't want to get super into it, but I just want all of my black subs and my black viewers to know that I see you, I feel you, I hear you, and I love you. And everyone else, of course, y'all know I love you too. I got enough love in these titties for everybody, okay? So don't go getting all salty in my comments, because I will block and delete you. With all of that said, we are here to watch OSP's failed assassinations of history video. I've been on a history kick lately. I don't know why, but y'all are just gonna have to suffer through this with me, because I really like history stuff. With all of that said, let's go ahead and get started. Let me see if I can work this stupid pointer thing that Chavez gave me. I'm struggling here. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Play.
Diplomacy is complicated. You have to manage competing interests and work cooperatively to ensure the best communal outcome. But luckily, there is another, much more efficient option.
Murder!
Because once you leap over those pesky little speed bumps like the worth of human life, it becomes so much easier to solve your problems by just unexisting the people who disagree with you.
Zero negative
like a
consequences.
psychopath. But despite the nominal simplicity of huck a javelin through his abdomen, killing people can be surprisingly labor-intensive and prone to mistakes, especially when the target is some political bigwig. So, to have a laugh at the expense of some of the most notorious failed assassins, let's do some history. Our first story takes us to the eastern edge of the Mediterranean at the tail end of the Roman Republic, which was perilous for everybody involved. If you weren't Roman, you were always in danger of being conquered, and if you were Roman, then it's likely you were in the middle of an active civil war. In such a politically hazardous climate, everybody was under threat of sabotage, and in 120 BC, King Mithridates of Pontus was poisoned by none other than his wife. Needless to say, the royal kiddos were spooked by the proposition of an arsenic sippy cup, so one of the princes booked it for the woods. While he was wandering around the Pontic wilderness building support for a coup, the prince decided to be proactive about the inevitable threat of poison. So whenever he stumbled across one of Anatolia's many poison-filled plants, animals, or minerals, he just ate it. The logic being that if he ingested all of the poisons imaginable in small doses, he could build up an immunity to it and become invincible. So after 7 long years in the woods getting blasted on tree frogs and vipers, the prince returned to his capital of Sinope and cooed his way into becoming King Mithridates VI. With crown on head and kingdom in hand, Mithridates set about doing 2 things: expanding his state to prepare against the Roman threat, and doing way the hell more poison. And now that the king had graduated from his days of just eating stuff and seeing what happens, he was going to use his royal resources to be scientific about this. He built a series of poison labs to source more elaborate ingredients, test new concoctions on prisoners, develop tailored antidotes, and of course, get more poison to snack on. No, His Highness the King does not have a poison addiction. He can stop anytime he wants. But why stop when he had baller party tricks like gulping down snake venom? Now the thing is, part of me feels bad for memeing so hard on Mithridates, because he was an extremely learned king who collected massive libraries, could speak well over a dozen languages, and grew his small kingdom into a Black Sea empire.
Amazing.
But on the other hand, funny haha poison man, so my hands are tied. Mithridates likely survived several assassination attempts, but will never really know how many because none of them worked. Of course, like everybody else in the ancient Mediterranean, his downfall was Rome. His grand strategy was to incite a revolt in western Anatolia and Greece to let disgruntled Romans do what they do best. The confusion of mass slaughter made great cover for Mithridates' march into Roman territory, and he managed to get in a spirited back and forth for a good 2 decades before Rome stopped compulsively slapping itself in the face and actually started trying. Eventually, General Pompey, soon to be Pompey the Great, later to be Pompey the Headless, stomped the Pontic army and forced Mithridates to flee across the Black Sea to Crimea. After failing to to raise another army, he decided it was better to just die than to get paraded in a Roman triumph. So with his back against the wall, Mithridates killed himself by poison. Except he did not, because he was immune.
How?
Plan B was asking a friend of his to do him a solid and just stab him. It's lucky he didn't supplement his daily poison regimen with doses of tiny knives, or else he really would have been screwed. And so King Mithridates died as he lived. Not dying from poison. Now, trying to kill one king is enough of an endeavor, but as time goes on, administrations evolve and power often gets distributed to a much wider base. This makes it infinitely more difficult to off an entire government at once. But luckily, the 1600s are a wonderful time full of such modern marvels as high explosives, and some enterprising lads wanted to make use of this new tech. So, let's set the scene. England has been ruled by Protestants for nearly a century, and they were making life increasingly suckish for the English Catholic holdouts. And since England's Anglican monarchs kept butting heads with very Catholic Spain and getting excommunicated by the very Catholic Pope, adherence to the Church in Rome was treated on par with being an enemy of the state. This was an extremely complex mesh of religious and political factors that would require a delicate touch to overcome. Or blow up Parliament. No fuss, no persuasion checks, just an ass ton.
How have I never heard about this? I guess I do kind of tend to stop paying attention after Elizabeth I. But also, how did I never know about this?
Of explosives. That was the logic of these fine morons: Robert Catesby, Guy Fawkes, and 10 other Catholics conspiring to destroy the Protestant government of England under the new King James I. The scariest part of the story is that the plan might have worked if the conspirators shared more than 5 brain cells between them. For instance, step 1 was renting an apartment next to the Palace of Westminster under the bulletproof alias of John Johnson, which must have made the landlord think, ah yes, Mr. John Johnson, he must have a respectable career of doing job at place. They then spent weeks hauling 36 full barrels of gunpowder into the apartment in advance of Parliament's reopening. But boomifying an entire government body was only part of the scheme, as they planned to start a revolt in the countryside and capture the king's Catholic daughter to install her as a puppet queen. And lastly, they'd sail over to Europe to get the Pope to support the new Catholic government and pretty please forgive us for all of the murder. So that was the idea, but Parliament was closed for most of the year because of plague, mood, and wouldn't reopen until November 5th. That left a lot of time for the conspirators to ruminate on the moral implications of terrorism, not because murder was wrong or anything silly like that, but because they had some friends in Parliament. So despite strict orders not to send any warnings to anybody, one of the conspirators sent a "hey, maybe don't go to Parliament" note to his buddy. Now this alarm bell wrapped in a red flag had the easily foreseeable consequence of getting reported straight to the Chamberlain, who proceeded to search the entirety of Parliament on the night before the plot. Imagine their surprise to find a lone gentleman standing next to a pile of firewood and 36 barrels of gunpowder in an otherwise empty apartment. A gentleman who insists that his name is John Johnson, esteemed doer of job at place. I'm sure Guy Fawkes was shocked the constable saw through his ironclad disguise. Fawkes was subsequently tortured into giving up the names of his co-conspirators who were busy up in the countryside failing to start their revolt. Unfortunately, their excess storage of gunpowder had gotten soaked, so these big brain boys laid it out to dry.
So, like, I just want to say, like, this is cool, but I just want to say they were very good at torture back then. Like, there was no Geneva Convention or like, oh, this is, no. Like, go ahead on the rack, sir. Would you like to be drawn and quartered? Do you want to watch your foot get boiled before your very eyes? You're just like, you know, I think I will tell you who my co-conspirators are. Can I live with both of my feet and eyeballs?
In front of a fire, which is just the most apt visual metaphor for a plant blowing up in your face. The crew was captured and executed, and for the next century and change, British Catholics were treated even harsher because of their association with the Gunpowder Plot, even losing the right to vote until 1829. Nice job ending that religious persecution. Good work, team. Now, I was originally going to wrap this video with a story of either Rasputin or Fidel Castro, but Rasputin did end up getting shot to death, so he's disqualified, and the only thing more numerous than the CIA's 600 assassination attempts on Castro is the amount of low-effort listicles about it. Instead, we're gonna ignore the rest of the world and cozy up in Venice. So, the Venetian Republic, the longest-lasting and best government in world history, I need not say more. But sometimes, rarely, the Serenissima made some tactical errors. In 1310, Venice had ruffled enough Vatican feathers to earn themselves an interdict, in which the Pope smacks the Holy Banhammer onto an entire city. This was bad news for a mercantile island republic with approximately 4 square feet of arable land, as the man in charge of this mess, Doge Gradenigo, was immensely disliked and had to take draconian steps to quell all the unrest. In a dicey situation like this, Venetian nobles had the option to A, deal with it, or B, riot. So with the Great British Boom House still a couple centuries off, how did this conspiracy go down? Well, it started with a handful of snippy nobles and one Baiamonte Tiepolo, the grandson of a former doge and a man with no qualms about hucking the republic off a bridge and installing himself as despot. These gents were all but certain that scores of Venetian nobles and commoners alike would join in their quest to stab the doge in the face, so they sent out a lot of feelers to their friends around town. But coup is a strong word, and some people were distinctly not on board and did the responsible thing of reporting the conspiracy right to the doge. But even if the conspirators knew to expect a veritable party bus of guards, their more pressing concern was weather, namely the springtime lightning storms. See, their foolproof plan was to take 2 groups across town and raise the citizens to arms before meeting in St. Mark's Square to storm the doge's palace.
But it's raining.
When they charged through the streets at dawn and started shouting, "Liberty! Death to the doge!" nobody could hear them over the sound of thunder and pouring rain. And anybody who liked what these guys were selling weren't about to go running into a storm at 6 a.m. The West Group ran smack into a band of the doge's guards and might have regrouped if not for some priests and painters on their way to work who took the initiative to waylay the conspirators a second time. Tiepolo's East Group had similar luck, gaining exactly 0 sympathetic rebels. In fact, Venetians were opening their windows specifically to shout insults. And not to be outdone, one kind old Signora Rossi heard the commotion while doing her morning chores, and when she opened her window, she dropped, or maybe threw, her stone mortar at the conspirators, landing square on the head of the standard bearer and killing him instantly. Tiepolo saw his comrade drop dead in front of him and took it as a sign that this was just not his morning. So he ran away and politely accepted his banishment. Meanwhile, old lady Rossi was hailed as a hero for her ingenuity and impeccable aim. As her reward, she simply asked to fly a Venetian flag on feast days and for her landlord to never raise the rent on her family home so long as the Republic endured. Now this was a god-tier play, because Venice took the conspiracy as a hint to reform, to better avoid future treason, but also to improve the government's overall efficiency, which combined to give the Venetian Republic another 5 centuries of life. I mean, sure, Tiepolo and his conspirators made a series of fatal mistakes in their slapdash plot to kill the doge, but oh boy, if they only knew that Signora Rossi was waiting for them, those fools would have stayed the hell home. So, aside from some boring nerd morals about how murder isn't a cure-all, what have we learned today? Well, Mithridates should have been more careful with what he wished for in his poison immunity, so the rest of us should probably lay off the arsenic and stick to alcohol as our poison of choice. Meanwhile, Guy Fawkes is proof that the best laid plans are only as strong as your dumbest nickname. And finally, Divine Smite comes in many forms, and old Venetian ladies with stoneware is a good one to look out for. Thank you so much for watching. As I'm sure you could tell, this video was a blast to work on, so I've got to thank the patrons for voting.
That was a good video. I really enjoyed that. If you guys know of any other failed assassinations aside from the ones on Castro, because like we all know that they exist. I don't know like what they were, like, because I don't care, so I never bothered to look into it, but I know there were a lot and I know that they failed. And I just think it's so interesting that the CIA managed to fail so many times. Like, get your shit together. Or actually don't. Wait, no, I changed my mind. Don't get your shit. All right, I'm gonna end the video here before I say more things that I regret. Peace out, Hova Skits. It's getting lit.